Hello, my name is Peter Parfitt and welcome to New Brick Workshop. Now, if you've got some of those up above cupboards where you end up putting one thing on top of another and it gets to become a nuisance, then this video is for you. We've got one such cupboard. It was so untidy when I did the little shot to show you. I had to tidy it up first because I'd be so embarrassed about the rubbish that was in there. Anyway, I'm going to make a simple set of little sort of containers to go in the space so I can have individual things where they should be, and you could adapt this idea to suit your needs. Now I have two of these, and they fit one on top of the other inside the cupboard. The wood I've used is 6mm thick oak veneered MDF. It's very cheap and cheerful stuff because I was given it. And I've got dividers here and here. Now the joints at these corners are mitred, and it's just glue alone holding that together. These dividers here are cut into the front and back down to about half the depth of the stock. The bottom here is a piece of 5mm ply which I rescued from an old set of drawers which were being thrown away. And because this is going to sit inside a cupboard, I put a pair of holes here so that it can be lifted out. Now this is a remarkably strong construction. Glue alone is all that's required, and this can certainly take a reasonable amount of weight. Now let's see how I went about making it. Now I'm starting by cutting my stock using my Festool track saw on my track saw cutting station which I created with the Pathguide system. As a matter of interest, about a week ago I clocked up the record of having sent out 1,200 copies of the plans for this track saw cutting stations free of charge to anyone on YouTube. I do need an email address though in order to get it to you. And so the combination of laying this out with the Pathguide system and then using dogs, track saw, means you can cut at near perfect right angles. And I'm about to cut this stock now. So everything's set up. I've pushed my stock with a good edge up against those path fences. I've got my pencil line where I need to do the cut, and I'm ready to go. It's as simple as that. Now, let me show you this. I don't know if it shows up well enough, but that is an absolutely perfect cut. I've now cut the various pieces so they're the right width using the little CMS unit. Now Festool don't sell this anymore, which is a great pity. So if you see one going second hand, maybe on eBay, and you like the look of it, you better snap it up. Now, some of you may remember a long time ago I told you where I got this oak veneered MDF from. It's only just over 6mm in thickness, and it was a sheet used to protect a whole pallet load of very, very expensive sheet material. And when it was delivered to a friend of mine, it was just left there, and he gave the whole sheet to me. It's been knocked around a bit. I've used almost all of it now, and these are the last few pieces, and you can see it's got some pretty odd marks on it. I'm not really worried. This is something which is effectively, it's a tool, it's something that's going in a cupboard to do a job. But this light bit of sanding I'm doing will be just enough just to make it look quite reasonable, and I'll then put a bit of Osmo on it and that will finish it off nicely. Well, I've sanded these pieces off, and I've now looked at them carefully and decided which side I'd prefer to have on the outside, and I put them up that way because now I've got to go across to the router table and set it up in order to do the groove to take the bottoms of the little boxes. Now, in order to get the grooves at precisely the right depth in this fairly narrow stock, so I want to do a channel, a groove in this to take the base, which is 3mm deep, and I want it to be exact. So what I'm using is this little depth gadget which I got from Trend a long time ago, and I've got it set here. I'm going to raise this up and I'm going to get it exactly at the 3mm mark. And when you're doing this, obviously one's looking at the gauge there, it's 2.2 at the moment. Try not to go past the mark. The reason is that some router tables, this one is included, when you go back down again, it sometimes lags before it starts to drop, and therefore it's better to go up to the precise height you want rather than going beyond it. 3 exact. And this is a good little gadget. I've used it a lot. I'm perfectly happy with its accuracy. Now, in order to set the fence, I've got a piece of the same material I'm using for the sides. I've got the cutter turned in such a way that one of its flutes is going directly back. And I'm going to move the fence forward so it just touches. Height set, my fence set, I can now do the channels. Now, when you're going to work through a lot of stuff like this, it's a good idea to have all your stock lined up so that the correct side is facing downwards, and I've done that carefully with this. And also, if it's relevant, with the correct edge facing towards the fence. And I've got this all lined up here. I'm ready to go. There's one other thing to watch, and that is with thin stock, when you're passing past the cutter, sometimes it doesn't lay absolutely flat. So I'm going to use this gadget to push things along and keep it flat as I go past the cutter. The next stage is to cut all the mitres, which will form the joints for these box units. Now, I'm lucky enough to have the Capex, and this is really, really simple to set up. I just set it at the 45 mark there, clamp it in position, and I'm now ready to go. And I can do repeat mitre cuts very easily. Now, if you don't have a mitre saw like this, you could try cutting them using a track saw. It might not be quite so accurate as far as the 45 degree goes. You could also try doing it on a router table using a 45 degree or chamfer cutter. But again, it might not be quite so accurate. I don't believe it's very easy to do these by hand using a saw. But you could try, and if you become expert at it, do write and let me know. I'm going to set this up, 45 degrees there. I'm going to have to remember every time that when I'm doing a cut like this, the groove has always to be facing downwards so that the mitre is in the right direction. Now, if you don't do this regularly and you're worried about the accuracy, use a clamp to hold your workpiece in place. And there's that first mitre cut. Now, because of the way I'm doing this, I've cut that first one. I now rotate this to do the second cut. And at that point, then, this mitre has its pointy edge off the floor, which means I can use my standard stop here, and I've set it at the distance I require, and I can now do repeat cuts. So it's as simple as that. So there are my first two mitres on this piece. All I've got to do now is do the rest. Ha-ha! I'm going to have some internal dividers which go front to back, and so I'm just going to mark up where I need to do the trenching cuts for these. I think it's better to put these dividers in a shallow trench because that then gives a slightly bigger glue line, it positions them more accurately, and overall I think the structure will be a little bit stronger as a result. So I'm just working out where this should go. It's going to be just here. Now, in order to do trenching cuts on the Capex, one needs to do several things. There's a trenching control lever here, but also one needs to remember that the stock needs to be moved forward, because when you get to the end of the cut, because of the shape of the saw blade, you won't get to the far side of the cut. So therefore you need to have a distance piece at the back here. That brings the workpiece forward, and so you can do your trenching cuts. Now I'm going to set this up using the lasers, and you can probably just about see I've got the laser there. That's in the right position, but I need a stop, and so what I'm going to use is I'm going to use one of the offcuts that I've done here, and I'm going to clamp that in position here, and that will act as a stop, so that I can now do repeat trenching cuts in the same place. Obviously I'm going to have to do 2 cuts, one on either side to get the actual width that I need, but that's not a big deal. All I now need to do is to set up the depth of cut. Now I've got a gash piece of the material, and I'm going to judge the depth that I need, and I can make an adjustment here. I think I'm happy with that, so I'll leave it there. Now, with any mitre saw, when you're doing trenching, because of the way these machines are designed, is that when you get pressed down like this, you will almost inevitably will get a deflection of the carriage going downwards, which would make a slightly deeper cut as you start. So one's got to work out a technique, and the technique is simple. What you need to do is to come down to the trench stop position, feel comfortable there, and then start the trenching cut, and don't apply any additional downward pressure as you go along the cut. Now I think my width may be just a fraction more than 2 saw blades thicknesses, so I might need 3 cuts. So I've got one which I'm going to do now. I'm all set up to do one in what will be the middle, and I'm going to go through all of them. So having done those, I'm now going to set up now for the final cut, and this has to be done with some care. So I've just moved this over a tiny bit. I may need to adjust it, but I'm creeping up to where I want it to be. Let's try this. That's it, super. So that's it, absolutely spot on. I can now do all of these. Then this next part is optional. I want a couple of holes, one either side. You can put your finger through to pull the thing out and grab it. You could put little tiny handles on there, but I'm using almost the full depth of the cupboard, so I don't have room to come forward for a handle. So I'm just going to put a couple of holes. I'm going to round them over so they're nice and smooth, and then that will be that done. Now I want to just show you this, and I hope it shows up well. Look how clean that hole is. That's the entry side, and look how clean it is on the exit side. Now I moved over to Famag Forstner bits quite a while ago, and they're very good. And the next thing I'm going to do is just break the edges, both at the top and at the bottom. Now I'm going to have divider pieces that go front to back, and in order to work out how long these should be, I've got to measure from the inside of the mitre here to the inside of the mitre there, and I've got to do it really, really accurately. So I know that's 254. However, we've got to make it slightly bigger so that it goes into these recesses. That's 2.5. So if I then add 5 to that, that means 259 for my pieces that go in. And whilst I'm at it, I'm also going to measure across between the edges of the mitres here and here, and I'm going to then add on the allowance for the base. And I know my extra bit for the base is going to be 5.5 millimeters total, so I've added that on, and I now know the sizes of the bases I'm going to cut. And again, for really accurate cuts, I'm doing this on the track saw cutting station. Right, now we get to the fun bit, which is the assembly, and I'm using the technique which I've used many times before, taught to me by my very good friend David. It's important to make sure that you've got all the channel cutouts for the base in the same line, and then it's also important to have a straight edge if you've got long pieces like this. You're then going to put masking tape in several places. This is such a simple method, but it is so effective. And most people think that MDF joined with just glue is going to fail. It won't if you glue it properly and if you use good quality glue. Because in this particular case, we've got the base and also the two little inserts, which are going to help improve the strength. But even without those, this should be perfectly okay. Right, now I'm going to put glue in all these places where glue needs to go. And then I'm going to bring it together, just like that. Now, I find when gluing MDF that it's generally better to apply glue to both faces that are going to come together. The reason is that MDF is a little bit absorbent. Right, now then, and I think the best way is to start by putting the bottom in like that and bring this one up. Okay, so far. Now with these insert pieces, I wasn't sure whether to put glue along the bottom as well. My worry was that at this stage it could wobble all over the place and not look very tidy. So what I'm doing is I'm going to do my best to get that in the right place. So I've done that one, and I'll do the same with this one. Now, the idea of the clamp is that it just gives that glue a squeeze. Now here comes the magic moment, as it were. Okay. I need tape on here. And this comes together perfectly square. Absolutely super. Then once all the glue is dry, it's just a question of peeling off the tape. Generally pretty easy to do. Now a little tiny bit of glue has stained that edge there, but I think I'll get that off with the sander. And just have a look closely at this edge here. You see that joint is rather good. Very good. And you really can't see any of those glue stains now. They've all gone. I'll just put some pins there so that when I've put the Osmo on the underside here, I can rest that on there and it hardly marks the bottom. And the Osmo I'm using is the 3011 clear gloss. It's my favourite Osmo for indoor work and it'll go on very easily. I'm only going to use one coat on this because it's going to sit inside a cupboard. Now, although this is an exposed edge of MDF, the Osmo soaks into it quite nicely and actually serves to harden up and seal the edge of the MDF. Now Osmo does go on very quickly and easily, and as long as you finish with the grain you'll get a very good finish. Well, that's it. I'm just going to leave that to dry now, and by tomorrow morning this will be in use. Well, these are finished now. They're ready to be put into action and the Osmo has gone off nicely. Now I just want to point out, if you measure things really carefully and everything is cut nice and square at the beginning, it comes together absolutely perfectly. So there we are, and that cupboard now will be much tidier. Many thanks for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.